Thank you, everyone. First of all, can we thank again our amazing models? That is who we are fighting for. Young and old, kids and parents and grandparents. This is who we are fighting for each and every day. And I used to be able to stand at a podium and say, my name is Sharon McGowan and I represent the United States. 5'3" lesbian from Queens, bringing the thunder with your tax dollars. And I don't want to linger too much on the what could have been, but let's have a moment and recognize, this time last year, we didn't know that this was how it was going to play out. I'll be honest with you folks, this is my plan B. I wasn't planning to be up here. I had work to do. President Obama did some great stuff, but there was work left to be done. And I was determined and committed to doing that work. And I sort of went into this weekend, this time last year, with that little bit of dread that I think some of us had, that maybe this wasn't going to actually work out the right way, but I grabbed my daughter and I went to vote, and I was not going to have my joy taken away from me. This was going to be okay. And then it wasn't. And I think that we all had a day or two of being in a little bit of shell shock, trying to figure out what did this all mean. I know that I didn't go to work that next day. I grabbed my wife and my 5-year-old daughter and my newborn baby, and we thought about what was this going to mean for us. And it got practical. We had these moments of thinking, I better go to the State Department and get that passport before Mike Pence and Donald Trump decide that we're not a family. I better make sure that we have all of those documents that I used to carry with me diligently before the days of Obergefell still back in my pocket. It was that visceral and it was that real. But I also faced a personal question of what was I going to do? And how was I going to tell my daughters that I spent these next 4 years? And it was a really hard choice because there was a piece of me that really felt like it was important maybe to stay on the inside. Maybe I needed to be one of those people who sort of, watched the ship and figured out where the bodies were going to be buried and figured out how to somehow hold back, what we thought might be coming. And let's be clear, it was Donald Trump, but we all knew what we were getting when Mike Pence was named, right? A guy who was so outrageous, so bigoted, he couldn't even get himself reelected in Indiana, and yet he was Donald Trump's number 2. So we knew it was coming. But for me, in many ways, the moment came when Jeff Sessions was announced as the president's nominee for Attorney General. I knew that there was no place for me in a Justice Department led by Jeff Sessions. And I immediately started thinking, where could I go? I have not changed my mission. I have not changed teams, but I may need to change uniforms. And so who did I call? I called Rachel Tiven. And I knew that Rachel had already been thinking about what was the next step. What was Lambda 2.0 going to look like in a post-Obergefell Obergefell world? And one of the things that she knew, and many of the people like John and Andrew and other folks in this room, Rachel, knew that we needed to up our game in Washington because that was where a huge piece of the work that had been done was going to affect our lives and continue to affect our lives. And I said to Rachel, I was like, the calculus hasn't changed because we don't have the White House that we anticipated. In fact, more than ever, we need to be there. We need to be present. We need to be in the room, in their face. And if you want me, I'm all in. And on Inauguration Day, as I was sort of huddled in a ball, trying to figure out how the hell we were going to get through this, I got the call. I got that call from Rachel asking me to join her team, and I was all in. And I'll be honest, there were moments of doubt and guilt in those first few days. I actually met with my boss, the chief of the appellate section of the Civil Rights Division, the job that I had been groomed to take and to lead the Civil Rights Division into the next generation. Told her what I was doing and where I was going, and she sighed and said, you're doing exactly what you need to do to protect our community. And then that night, I was home, sitting on the couch, watching Rachel Maddow with a drink, as we all need to do these days. And I saw Sally Yates, right, our acting Attorney General, tell Donald Trump she would not defend his Muslim ban. And I had a moment of doubt. I said, maybe I left too soon. Maybe I should have stayed and stood there with Sally Yates. And then we all came back from commercial break and Sally got the can and I was like, thank you, universe. I'm feeling pretty good about my choice right now. And we got right to work. And honestly, between that time when I submitted my notice and when I got myself sort of set up in my office of one in DC, it was amazing because so many people said, well, I actually thought Lambda had a DC office. And I was like, well, we've been doing the work, but we're here. We're digging in. We're holding our ground. And the first thing that we faced, the first thing that was coming at us was Neil Gorsuch. And let's all remember, when he was nominated, we had all this craziness going on, but what was that? What was the dialogue? Oh, this is this is a reasonable choice. This is Donald Trump. Maybe he's not so crazy. He's a nice moderate guy. He's got gay friends. First of all, I don't know where those gay friends are. I don't want to talk to any of them. But we knew, right? And Lambda, out of the gate, knew what a threat Neil Gorsuch was to our community. And so I immediately plugged into the networks of people, the women's groups, the choice groups, the racial justice groups, the environmental groups. We knew that we needed to sound the alarm. And we couldn't tolerate people saying, well, it's just Justice Scalia's seat. It's just a wash. It wasn't a wash. Not only was Neil Gorsuch potentially even more nefarious than Justice Scalia, but we're looking at 40 more years of that. And that is not acceptable. And so frankly, I was involved and we were signing on the letters and going to coalition meetings. And I'm like, when that LGBT letter comes around, Lambda's going to be at the top of the list. That's right. And when that LGBT letter comes into my inbox, we're going to totally sign that letter. Where's that letter? I was like, I guess I'm writing the letter. All right. So we got down and with the amazing team that we had, sort of Eric Lesh and Yuvraj Joshi and Jenny Pizer, we pulled together a letter that sort of made the case for why Neil Gorsuch was not somebody that we should all just, wipe our hands and say, it's a wash. We wrote a compelling letter that we had over 20 LGBT groups join because they knew that if Lambda, the organization that relied on the courts to vindicate the rights of our communities, was willing to stand up and speak out, they knew it was serious. And they knew that they needed to sign on. And frankly, a lot of the groups that signed on wouldn't necessarily have felt like they had the expertise to speak about the threat that Justice Gorsuch was going to pose. But when Lambda put those words on paper, they knew that Lambda was speaking for all of us. And so then we saw Senator Chris Coons use our letter to systematically dissect Neil Gorsuch's record. And by the time we were done, yes, we lost in the sense that we lost the vote, but let's be clear, Mitch McConnell had to blow up the rules to win, right? When we were done, we weren't talking about Neil Gorsuch, moderate guy. We all knew what we were getting with Neil Gorsuch. And I'll be honest, I'm a little tired of writing I told you so blogs, but Neil Gorsuch, thank you very much, has delivered in spades everything that we knew he would be. The first opportunity that he had to try and gut the meaning of Obergefell, he was there writing a dissenting opinion in a case that was involving something as straightforward as whether or not marriage equality means you get to have your name on your child's birth certificate. And so now, as we continue to do the work and as we continue to lead the charge on these judicial nominations, I have the benefit of being able to say, fool me once, shame on you, but, we know what we're talking about. And so that's why this past week, we had Senator Feinstein quoting from Lambda Legal's letter when she was talking about Joan Larson, who was just confirmed for the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. And so look, we know that we don't have the votes right now to beat back most of these nominees, but we're not going to stop. And part of what it is trying to make sure that folks understand the threat that these particular nominees pose, but also stop some of these dead in their tracks. Some of the victories that we're winning are by keeping people off the list in the first place, right? And then for other folks like Jeff Mateer, this individual who comes out of one of these crazy anti-LGBT organizations talking about transgender children, our beautiful gifts as part of Satan's plan on earth, I don't see him getting a hearing anytime soon, right? And so we're going to have to continue to keep up that pressure, make sure folks understand the nature of the risk, because here's the other piece of this. It's the courts that are going to be the legacy of this administration. We've got 4 years, God willing, not more, and maybe less, of Donald Trump. Who knows? We'll see how that works out. But this is something that we'll be dealing with for generations. But here's the other piece I have to tell you. Enter Jeff Sessions stage right? Jeff Sessions putting out arguments, somehow suggesting that a baker has more right to your wedding and more right to be able to engage in his hateful speech than you do to go into the market and buy a service in the same way anybody else can. Jeff Sessions going into court and flipping positions, ignoring the law, claiming that the federal law that prohibits sex discrimination in employment doesn't protect us, when in fact court after court says that it does, right? And so we're going to be there, we're going to be litigating against Jeff Sessions, we're going to take his arguments down. I have no doubt that Omar and Greg and Susan and Karen and the folks working on the Evans team, when the court grants cert in our case, are going to show Jeff Sessions and his like once and for all just how wrong they are. But let's be clear, whether it's marriage defense work, whether it's the employment employment discrimination work and the other sex discrimination work that we're doing to protect our community, we are living on borrowed time if we do not protect our courts. We absolutely have to stay engaged in that fight because look, Jeff Sessions can write his garbage memos all he wants. And if we're in front of fair judges, I'm less worried. But they're losing the game. They're losing in courts, they're losing in Congress, so they're changing the refs. And we need to stop them. We need to make sure that everybody knows the grave threat that is being posed and to be as intense about our desire to make sure the courts reflect our values as a nation as the other side has been. Because let's be clear, they have been lying in wait, waiting for this moment. This is the plan that has been in place. This is why many people who would like to sort of pretend that they didn't really want Donald Trump went to the polls and voted for him, to get the courts exactly where they want them to be. And Lambda Legal's not going to stand for it. And so I thank you all so much for your support. I can tell you absolutely, Lambda Legal being in the room matters. I have heard it in public sessions, I have heard it in elevator conversations. Lambda Legal matters. We are our community's lawyers, we are their brains, we are their voice, and when we speak, people listen.
Amen.
And so thank you for helping us get our little DC operation, the little engine that could, up and running and in the face of this administration. But I also want to thank my boss, my friend, Rachel Tiven, because without her, I might be hiding under my desk at the Justice Department. Probably not, but I was able to face Inauguration Day knowing that I had gotten a different kind of call. I had gotten a call to serve, and with Rachel Tiven leading the charge, they're going to lose and they know it. So, without further ado, our fearless leader, Rachel Tiven. So that's why we are in good hands. I think you now got a really good sense of why we are going to win in the end.
And I just want to leave you by talking about one case, because he's going to have time to bid on the silent auction. I want to tell you one thing we are doing, because it's not all defense. There's an enormous amount of affirmative work. Lambda has been pushing justice forward, not just on the defensive, but pushing forward from our founding in 1973. And this year, we are taking the freedom to work and to be out at work and to be safe at work everywhere around the country to the Supreme Court of the United States. So, we are representing a brave woman named Jamaica Evans. Jamaica was fired from her job as a security guard at a hospital in Savannah, Georgia, because they didn't want a lesbian at their hospital. And Jamaica has gone with us to court, and we are taking her case to the Supreme Court to prove that LGBT discrimination is a form of sex discrimination, and it is against the law everywhere in the country.
Amen.
If Jamaica had been an employee of a hospital in Indiana, where this spring we were able to convince the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals by a vote of 8-3 that it is sex discrimination to fire someone because they are gay, right? And as the court said in that case, it would require considerable calisthenics to remove the sex from sexual orientation. And this is right following on fantastic wins on behalf of trans people in multiple circuits. It is sex discrimination if you fire us from our jobs. And we have to get the Supreme Court to take this case this year because of everything Sharon just described. We are in a race against time to get a fair hearing in front of 9 judges who will hear this case this year. You heard it here first. You're going to hear about Jamaica Evans, lots more this year. We are incredibly excited about this case. And we thank you for all of the support that has gotten us here to this point. We are able to do this work because we are here, and because we are in Washington, and because we are the only LGBT legal organization all over the country. We have 6 offices, 110 people fighting for LGBT equality and the safety and well-being of people living with HIV all over the United States. And it really is because of you here in Connecticut that you have our backs, that you are making this possible for states that are not as secure, that don't have the wonderful leadership that you have here. That's really what makes it possible. So thank you, thank you, thank you.